Roman politics, man. When Rome became an empire, there was no politics. Every time you would have a successor, they would just completely wipe out the old house of friends and family, and not just wipe them out, but pretty much exterminate them all. Let's do a little bit of update. Who are we talking about? Why are we talking about this? In order to figure out who Jesus is, we got to look at the history of the thing, right? And I heard that there's more evidence for Tiberius, or there's less evidence for Tiberius, who is the emperor during the time that Jesus was crucified. So you had Diocletian. Diocletian liked to kill Christians and persecute Christians. So did Decius, and Nero. Nero liked to persecute Christians as well. Nero, he was fiddling while Rome burned. Nero, he's the one that beheaded Peter and Paul. Who? The founder of the church? Paul? Peter? He went after the first house and the second house of Christianity. Paul's going to hijack what James, Peter, and John had started. They were the founders in Jerusalem. And then 64, 67 AD, this is before the temple was destroyed. And then James was killed 62 CE. Nero just fiddled while Rome burned. And then Nero's going to blame the Great Fire on the Christians. The Great Fire of 64 AD. So how convenient. There's a big great fire, and then Peter and Paul gets beheaded. It was those two guys' fault. For what? Because they said they loved Jesus. And so you killed them? You beheaded them because you let the fire burn and burn and burn while you fiddled? You just said, oh, golly gee, willikers and fiddlesticks. Oh, fiddlesticks. There's a goddamn fire burning my whole city down. Constantine tolerated the Christians, so Diocletian, Nero killed Christians. Constantine tolerated the Christians. He built the original St. Peter's Basilica. So there's the Edict of Milan. He tolerated the Christians. And then Theodosius becomes a hardcore, orthodox, staunch Yeshua bar Yahweh. Yeshua bar Yahweh, Christy-ass motherfucker, 380 AD. Theodosius is the one that declares Christianity to be the official religion of the Roman Empire. Christ has won. Christ has won. Julius Caesar is going to get killed by Cassius and Brutus. 60 senators, but only 23 stab wounds. Uh-oh. Some of the senators didn't enjoy the melee. Josephus is the ultimate betrayer. Josephus, even though he's the historian, and to the secularist, the historian is Lord. Oh, okay, the gospel said this, that, and the other. Well, what did Tacitus say? What did Tacitus and Josephus say? Josephus is worse than Benedict Arnold. Josephus is worse than Judas Iscariot. Way worse than Judas Iscariot. Josephus was caught in a hole by the Romans. They're going to wipe out the temple and wipe out Jerusalem. Josephus was liked by the Vespasian guy, the Titus or whatever, that was conquering. And they said, hey, why don't you come out? And then they were mad. Hey, you know, his brethren, his Judaist brethren, they said, hey, you turncoat, betraying son of a bitch. And so Josephus come up with this plan. Okay, let's do this one thing where we just play like the paper, rock, scissors, and we'll have 3 people, and then you stab the one and you stab the other. Somehow, he had 70 people essentially commit mass suicide. He and another person are still living, and he says, hell, I'd like to keep on living. Wouldn't you like to keep on living? Let's just keep on living. So Josephus would be the Jew who had turned against the other Jews. He was the Jew who turned against the other Jews, got embedded with Vespasian, was even the interpreter when they came back because the siege of Jerusalem, the first Jewish revolt was what, from 66 to 73? It was like many years. 70 CE is when they're going to burn down the temple and pretty much kill everybody. That's why the Christians got the hell out of Dodge and went to Pella. So Josephus was on the side of the Roman conquerors who just wiped out pretty much all of Judaism, almost wiped out of all of Judaism. But then Josephus is going to write this big-ass, long-ass history book. So he both simultaneously destroyed the Jews and then also resurrected the Jews at the same time. He said Vespasian was actually the Messiah. It wasn't Jesus, it was Vespasian. It was the fucking emperor. And then the way he saved himself, he was like, you know what? I see that you have a sword and you're sitting there slaying everybody, but I have a vision. You're going to be the new emperor. Oh, that was so convenient. And then ultimately it turned into the correct course of events of history. So what luck. And then that's going to be the wagon he hitches himself to the stars. Josephus, man, the most ultimate betrayer in the world. He's stuck with 70 guys, gets them to commit mass suicide, and then turns against all of Jerusalem. He turns against all of Jerusalem just to save his own hide. But then he was able to write that history book. So it's like, okay, well, on one side, he's the Judas Iscariot, but on the other side, he helped fan the flames of Christianity. Julius Caesar is killed by Cassius and Brutus, 60 cinders, 23 stab wounds. Augustus was chosen by Julius to be successor, but Mark Antony was the second in command, so he was like the vice president. Mark Antony thought he would have been, oh, and these are honorable, good, righteous, and honorable men, he says sarcastically. So Augustus was chosen by Julius to be the successor. They're going to have the second triumvirate at first. You're going to have Augustus and Mark Antony, and then some guy named Lepidus. Who the hell is this Lepidus? Mark Antony, this is incredible. Mark Antony and Cleopatra, by the end of all this, is going to do a Romeo and Juliet. And I want to say, did Shakespeare just do the Romeo and Juliet because of Cleopatra and Mark Antony? They had lost the war. You had Octavian was marching towards him. I'm going to say in Egypt or something, but Mark Antony had heard that Cleopatra had killed herself or had been killed or had died, I think killed herself. So Mark Antony, so distraught that Cleopatra had killed herself, Mark Antony stabs himself. He stabs himself, but he didn't do a good job. But he's going to eventually die. So he gives himself a death blow, but he doesn't die immediately. And then later on he hears that Cleopatra was still alive. Cleopatra was still alive. And so then they're going to take Mark Antony and hoist him up the window. And Mark Antony is going to literally die in the arms of Cleopatra. Literally in Cleopatra's arms. And then Cleopatra tries to negotiate with Augustus, Octavian. She was trying to save her children. They were going to do a triumphant, thing with in Rome. She didn't want to be paraded around, as his tribute in the streets of Rome. So Mark Antony stabs himself in the stomach. When he's dying in Cleopatra's arm, Cleopatra is just crying, "My lord, my husband, my emperor." And then after the negotiations failed with Octavian, Cleopatra is going to kill herself with asp bite or some poison. And there was it Pride and Prejudice? They were saying, to die for love, to die for love. It looked like it was the end. Octavian's coming, with his troops. They're cornered. Maybe they could have survived as a prisoner. Josephus did. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King did. They were prisoners. But Malcolm X says that he was born in jail because he was born in America. Seneca, Nero wasn't only persecuting Christians, but Nero is going to force Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, to kill himself. Well, why don't you just kill yourself, huh? What, you're Nero? Yeah, why don't you just kill yourself?